Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Morgan. This is my channel, Pisces Paperbacks, and there's a lot of stuff happening right now. So basically, it is 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and I wanted to film outside because it snowed this weekend and it's beautiful outside, but sunset is at 5:18. Let me let my dog inside. So I ran downstairs, have all my physical books that I read this month in a bag, and I want to do my January wrap-up. That's what this is. I don't know if I said it already, but that's what this is. January. Overall, it feels like a really good reading month. I didn't read anything lower than I think I have 1, 2, 2.5 star, but that was a book that even though I disliked, it's objectively good and I know why people like it and I would still recommend it to people. It just wasn't for me. So generally a pretty good reading month. I read 16 books and it was nice, and it was a lot of physical and e-reading, whereas mostly ebooks, whereas last year primarily most of my reading was audiobooks. This year or this month I think I only read 3 audiobooks, 3 or 4, something like that. So feeling good. Let's just dive right on into it. I have a little list. That's what I'm working with. So first book of the year, starting off 2021, right? I read Gideon the Ninth by Tamsyn Muir. Oh my god, I read it because I'm part of a sapphic book club on Twitter, and every month we kind of all pick a book and then read it independently and then have a little chat at the end of the month. And Gideon the Ninth, I didn't expect to love it as much as I did, but it was 5 stars. When I tell you, I wept. It was, okay, let me just tell you what it's about. First of all, let me just say, I had no idea what was going on for half this book. Literally no fucking clue. I was confused. I didn't know who anybody was. I didn't know what words meant. I couldn't understand how the world worked. I just didn't get it. And I was still invested. I don't know, but truly, if you had asked me up to the 60% mark what the fuck was going on, I would not have been able to fucking tell you, which is maybe not a good sign, but I loved the book so much. So basically it is about Gideon, who is kind of like an indentured servant to the House of the Ninth, which is it's a space empire, and there's 9 houses and they each have a different aspect of necromancy that they focus on. And Gideon, along with Harrow, who's Harrow Hark, she's the heir of the 9th house, they get invited to go to this other planet to become one of the king's advisors, kind of. I don't know. And it kind of turns into this murder mystery situation with all these people in the house. And it's really pitched as lesbian necromancers in space, which on one hand is what it is, because it's about necromancers in space and they are lesbians, but it's not a romance. And I feel like that pitch is a little bit misleading. I would also say that it's kind of annoying when everybody is read Gideon the Ninth, it's lesbian necromancers in space, and then they don't tell you what the fucking book's about. So I tried to not do that just now. I hope I did an okay job, but it is so fucking good. I'm in love with Gideon. Oh my god. Big biceps, no brains. She's the woman of my dreams, and I'm in love with her, and I'm obsessed. Okay, book number 2, Lakewood by Megan Giddings. This was a horror release from late last year, and it is about a woman whose name I don't remember, and she, when faced with financial troubles and medical debt, signs up to be a part of a government medical experiment, and it kind of becomes this really dark, twisted, unnerving experience. I would definitely say, honestly, it was similar in energy to both Catherine House by Elizabeth Thomas and Fever Dream by Samantha Schweblin, which I read last year as well, but it was just very creepy and unsettling and surreal. You don't know what's true, you don't know what's happening, you kind of lose the sense of time as the main character is also losing this sense of time. There's a loud noise in the back. I'm really sorry about that. But it was very good. I did enjoy it. I think I gave it a 3. It wasn't, maybe a 4. It wasn't quite it for me, but I objectively really appreciated what it was doing. And I also think that because I read Medical Apartheid last year, which talks about the medical experimentation on Black people, well, the main character in Lakewood is a black woman and the author is a black woman. Having that context of like real life medical horrors that have been conducted on black people in America, like having that background information for this book made it like even more terrifying, because you know that a lot of it is true. But I enjoyed it. Gave it probably 3.5, 4 stars. And then I didn't read anything because I spent like 6 days just watching Bridgerton, which is my new favorite show of all time. I've watched it 2.5 times already, and I watched it for the first time this month. I'm in love with it, and it kind of set me on a little romance kick. So I read 4 romance novels like within 4 days. And the first was To Seduce a Sinner by Elizabeth Hoyt. This is one of my like, oh, I have it right here. This is one of my like long-standing favorite romance novels. I really enjoy it. It's about a marriage of convenience. They get married like within the first few chapters because he's looking for a wife. It gets left at the altar, and she goes up to him after like secretly harboring feelings for him for years and is like, I'll marry you. But she doesn't want to be hurt because she's been hurt in the past, so she doesn't want him to know that she loves her. She loves him. And it's kind of like having to woo your wife after you're already married. And I really love this book, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. This is a really fun romance novel to read. And it's good if you're looking for a historical romance where the heroine is not a virgin. So I really like how that's handled in this book. And it's rare, so I wanted to put that in there. Next, I read A Wicked Way to Win an Earl by Anna Bradley. And this is a really fun, another historical romance. It's my favorite, what can I say? And this is about a girl named Delia, and she and her sister have been invited to this house party in the country at the Earl of Carlisle's estate. And so this is Alex Sutherland, the Earl of Carlisle, and basically his father was engaged to Delia's mother, but the mother ran away and married like a nameless nobody, a penniless nobody, and it was like a really big scandal. It kind of like shamed the family name. So now it's present day, and Delia and her sister in his house, and his younger brother has a really big crush on Delia, and he's like, you cannot be with her. It would bring more scandal to the family name, and I built this name up from nothing because he like inherited like a ruined fortune, whatever. So he's really touchy about it, and then it just transpires that he and Delia have a really strong chemistry. I really enjoyed this book. I think that it is a better than average book in terms of like chemistry and relationship dynamics, but probably lower than average in terms of plot. There literally isn't a conflict except for like the interpersonal conflict, whereas I usually prefer romances to have more of an external conflict as well with the internal conflict. So this was enjoyable, 4 stars, but not the best thing I've ever read. Definitely not the worst. I really don't give that many 5 stars in romance because it's my favorite genre and I've read so many of them. My favorite ones really have to stand out to get a 5 star. So this was a really good one, but it wasn't like the best. Then I read The Most Eligible Lord in London by Ella Quinn. This is another historical romance about a girl named Adeline, and she is kind of from the country, and she's come into London because she wants to find a husband, and she's determined to avoid any rakes. And then she meets Lord Littleton. His name's Frederick, but they call him Fritz. And Fritz had kind of something happened last season that's maybe tarnished his reputation just a bit, and Adeline is convinced that Fritz is a rake and that she has to avoid him at all costs, and he's convinced that they would be a really good couple together, so he's basically just pursuing her the whole season. And then I guess the plot is that she overhears other girls talking about trapping him into a marriage, so they like team up to avoid that. It's mentioned in the synopsis. It is such a minor part of this romance novel. In the vlog where I read this, I said that it was a perfectly average book. I would honestly move that down. I think it's less than average. While they're both good characters, it was kind of boring in some ways because they're honestly just both genuinely nice characters with no flaws. Like, they don't have any flaws, and the conflict of the book is that she's like, I can't marry Fritz, he's a rake, and he's like, I want to marry this girl, but she thinks I'm a rake, but I'm just going to be nice to her. So the whole book is him being like a gentleman, a nice guy, like truly helping her out when she needs help, truly being there for her for her to confide in, truly there to collaborate with her in terms of conversation. He's not just talking down to her. And every time he does something where he's like, I'm a genuinely nice person and I want to be with you, she goes, but you're a rake, so this can't happen. I'm going to shut this down. There is ostensibly another antagonist, but he is basically kicked out of the narrative 2/3 through and then just isn't in the rest of the book. So this isn't my favorite, but it's a cute cover, so I'm still going to keep it. I love the pink. You know, it was fine. I gave it a 3. I'm probably going to bump it down to a 2.5. Next, I read The Ruthless Lady's Guide to Wizardry by C.M. Waggoner. I made a dedicated review video about this book, which I will link in the cards and in the description. But generally, this is a book about a petty lady criminal who is a fire witch named Delaria Wells, and she sees a job posting for a lady bodyguard position to protect a young lady of high standing who has recently gotten engaged and has had some threats made against her life. So it's basically just who's making the threats, and then once they figure out who makes the threats, how do we get them? So I enjoyed it from a distance. I like it more and more because what stands out is like the characters and the relationships, but the reading experience was really not a great one because the writing style was such a slog for me personally. So it was a very conflicting feelings about that book. Then I finally finished Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore by Robin Sloan. This is a book about a guy named Clay. It takes place in 2008 during the Great Recession, and Clay has just lost his job as a graphic designer for like a weird company, and he gets the job as the night clerk at Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore. But there's something weird about the shoppers. They never seem to buy anything, but they're checking out these big books that don't seem to have anything in them. And it's just like, is there a greater mystery afoot? What's the conspiracy about? And I really liked that it kind of really plays into the idea of it being a real life D&D quest. So I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed how this is a book for people who love books. And this is especially a book for people who love fantasy, which is really fun, even though it is like a contemporary mystery. So I really enjoyed those aspects, and I did shed a little tear at the end. But overall, I was just so like middlingly bored most of the time. Like, I was interested enough to keep going, and it read really fast once I got into it, but like it was just like you know, which is a little disappointing because I thought that I would love it. So I think I'm gonna give this book 3 stars. It was okay. I'm a little disappointed, but I don't hate it. Next, I listened to The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. This is his short, it's like 2 letters written from James to his nephew, talking about what it means to be a black man in America and the experience of blackness. And I thought it was phenomenal, like truly phenomenal. I wish I had a physical copy to annotate, which is like, it's kind of hard because sometimes usually with nonfiction, I don't feel the need to annotate or take notes. I'm not the type of person who like does that like ever. Even when I was in school, I was really bad at taking notes. It's just not something that comes like naturally to me. But when I was reading this, I really wanted to highlight quotes and take notes and really be able to like digest it. But I think because I was listening to it as an audiobook, I really didn't get the chance to do that. So I'm giving this book 4 stars. I thought it was phenomenal, and as I was listening to it, it was like, this is amazing. But now that I'm a little bit distanced from it, I read it a couple weeks ago, it's not that it's faded in its impact, but I feel like I don't remember the details enough to really point out specific things that I loved about it. I do know that I really liked how Baldwin was discussing his relationship with religion in the second half of it. I thought that was fascinating, and especially since it's a contemporary, like he's talking about contemporary life, but it was written in the past. Like I think this book was written in the 60s. So it was just like fascinating to me on many levels. And James Baldwin, again, remains a phenomenal writer. I can't wait to read more from him. I've loved both of the things that I've read from him, which was this and Giovanni's Room last year. Oh my God, I'm going so fast. I still have a lot left though, so. Next, I read Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power. This is Rory Power's second novel following 2019's Wilder Girls, which I really enjoyed. This, I didn't quite enjoy as much, but it ended up being a type of horror that I really like. So I'm not going to get into that, but it's basically about a girl named Margot, and she grew up, just her and her mom, not knowing anything about her family, not really knowing anything about their family history, and her mom refuses to talk about it. So when she one day discovers a picture of her mother as a child with a town name written on the back, she decides to set out on her own and find out a little bit more about if she has a family, what are they like, what is waiting for her there in her mom's hometown. Things are not what they seem. It's very creepy. I'm gonna give this book, again, 3 stars. So a lot of like 3-star reads this month, especially towards the second half of the month, oh my god. But I wish this had more of a commentary about environmentalism. Like, I feel like it was like almost there. It was knocking on the window, but it wasn't quite there. But I really liked, this is the problem that I have with a lot of the books that I read this month, is that a lot of them I would get most of the way through and I was like, I'm pretty bored, I'm kind of forcing myself through that. But then I'd get to like the last 25%, 20%, and I'd be like, what an ending. 4 stars. But it's like not actually a 4-star book, but I really liked the ending of this. I really liked what the horror turned out to be. It's very weird and I don't want to give anything away, so I'm not going to mention anything about it, but I thought that was so well done. I liked the way the book was written. I found Margot very frustrating at times. Like, she was a little like edgelord-ish when she's talking about her mom sometimes, and I get that it's a book and like that's how characters are when you're trying to develop them and like communicate to the reader like this person's beliefs and morals, but like sometimes it was a bit much in my opinion. This book was cool. I'm definitely going to read Rory Power's 3rd book through the library before buying it this time. I bought this before I read it and I didn't love it. So next time I'll just go through the library and then decide if I want to get it. That's the end of all the physical books that I read, like out of this bag, but there's nowhere to put it because I'm outside and it snowed. So I'm just gonna keep holding it. Next, I read The Silence of Bones by June Her. This is a historical mystery taking place in Korea in the year 1800. It's one of the first just straight up historical fiction books I've read in a really long time. Usually they're either historical fantasy or historical romance or something else. Oh my god, I completely missed a book earlier. I said historical romance. I completely missed Let Us Dream by Alyssa Cole. So we're going back to Let Us Dream. I read this during my romance binge earlier in the month, and this is a novella about a black woman in Harlem in like the 1920s, 1910s, and she is a club owner, she's a former sex worker, and she's a suffragette. She's really passionate about organizing for the women's vote. And then there is, oh, I forget his name. He is an illegal immigrant in New York, and he starts working as a chef in her kitchen, and they develop a relationship. I really liked this book. I loved the political messages that it was really dealing with. I loved the bibliography at the end that Alyssa Cole put in there. I wasn't like super convinced at like the very beginning, but the second half of this book is just phenomenal. Alyssa Cole is just so good with her character dynamics that she could take very small interactions and really communicate so much with them, and I'm just constantly in awe of her writing and her romances, and I loved it so much. I wish there was a second sex scene. There's really only like 1.5, but I loved their relationship. I loved the cute little epilogue. It's just so good. Okay, back to what I was talking about. The Silence of Bones, June Her, Korea, 1800, historical fiction. This is about a young girl who is kind of a servant of the local police department, because at this time, due to a certain codes, men were not allowed to touch women who they weren't related to or married to, and if they're investigating a murder, if there's bodies of women that need to be examined, they had women to do it. So this main character is working with the police department when she kind of gets involved in the murder of a young socialite named, I think her name was Lady X, Lady A, something like that, and she especially becomes involved when the inspector that she works for, who she kind of feels a loyalty to, becomes a suspect in the crime. And I really liked the end of this book. Again, I felt that it was kind of coldly written in some ways, and I think that's because a lot of the inner monologue was not quite about the main character's feelings, but it was about her thoughts. Sorry, I thought I saw someone like hit our kitchen window from the inside to like signal to me, but they did not. So in some ways I didn't like love this book, but I thought it was a really interesting mystery. I always love a mystery. I'm excited to read her book that's coming out this year, which is, I believe, The Forest of Stolen Girls, something like that. So this book, again, got a 3 stars. I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't like quite a winner. I still would recommend it to people, but it wasn't like the best for me. And then I have an arc. So this is The Knockout by Sajni Patel, I believe her name is. And this is a young adult contemporary about a girl named Karina who is secretly a Muay Thai fighter. And she gets the opportunity to go to the US Muay Thai Open, or whatever like the national championship competition is, and the book is really about her preparing to go to this competition and then also struggling with her Indian identity, which encourages women to be more feminine and more ladylike, and she feels that she doesn't really live up to those expectations because she's a fighter and because she doesn't want to do those ladylike things. And I really liked the last 20%. The last 20% of this book was so fun and fast-moving and interesting. The rest of the book, while enjoyable, I think I'm honestly just out of the practice of reading YA contemporaries, because most of the time I was like, it feels like nothing's happening, but so much is happening, because the fight doesn't happen until like towards the end. That's basically like the start of when it got fun for me. But the first like 70% of the book is just her preparing to go to the fight in a lot of different ways. So I guess in my head I thought the fight would happen like halfway through and then there would be like other stuff, but it's really just the build up to this fight and her becoming more confident in her identity, both as a Muay Thai fighter but also as an Indian young lady or young woman, and a relationship that she starts developing with the boy at school, which was so cute, but also like he seemed a little too perfect. Like, what were his flaws? I don't know. So overall, 3.5 stars, round up to 4 on Goodreads. I think I would definitely recommend people read this. Obviously I am not Indian, so I can't speak to the accuracy of the representation, but I thought that it was really interesting. I loved the cultural events and traditions that were really brought into the narrative, so I thought that was really fun, and I did like this one. And then I read The Duchess War. I finally read a Courtney Milan book. I've been trying to for like ever, but neither of my libraries have audiobooks of Courtney Milan stuff because a lot of them are self-published. And then I finally got an ebook or an e-reader, the Kindle, and I was like, yes, I can read Courtney Milan, but it doesn't have a Kindle copy of her first book at either of my libraries. So I read it on my computer, which sucked, but this book is so good. Oh my god, 4.5 stars. She is so good. I knew I'd like her stuff. I knew it. So basically, this is a book about, I forgot their names. Minnie, and I forget the guy's name. And basically, the book starts when the Duke, whose name I don't remember, is trying to hide away from the crowds at a gathering, and she sneaks into the library to get away from the crowds as well, and hides behind a couch from someone, and he's also behind the couch hiding from everyone, and she's like, and then runs away from him. And basically she figures out that the Duke is the person who's writing these pamphlets encouraging local workers to unionize, and which is like very, very against the social status and status quo. And she tries to blackmail him, and he's like, you can try to prove it, but also like he really likes her from the start. I loved this hero. I thought he's such a good guy, very like Simon from Bridgerton-esque in that he's honestly a good guy, but he's like this horrible family life. So that it was really sad to read in some like parts, but he is such a heart of gold. I loved him so much. He just wants to use his position of power to make good change in the world. And I loved Minnie as well. She is so intelligent and so good at strategy. And I think she's really a lot of like feminist historical romance heroines are trying to be, but in a way that's like supernatural, and like not supernatural, but like it feels very natural for the time and for her character. And I fell in love. I can't wait to read more from her. it is obviously getting dark, so I'm going to try and speed up. But the next book I read, I only have 3 left. The next book is What Big Teeth by Rose Szabo. So Rose Szabo is a non-binary author, and this is their novel debut. And this is a horror YA novel that's pitched as the Addams Family meets Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. So first of all, I love that pitch. It immediately sets the tone. It sets the vibe. It is about a girl named Eleanor who has been away at school for 8 to 10 years, I'm not sure which, because of an incident in her childhood that she can't remember. And she comes home and doesn't quite feel at home. She doesn't feel welcomed by her family. Everybody's very odd. Her mother's always in a bath. Her grandfather turns into a wolf. It's a lot. And her grandmother is keeping secrets, and everybody's keeping secrets, and she knows it. So when her grandmother suddenly dies and kind of leaves Eleanor in charge, she kind of has to start figuring out what these family secrets are and what their consequences are going to be. And I liked this book. I really liked the atmosphere, the writing, the imagery, I think is the strength of this book. The creepy haunted house, the family of kooky spooky people. I loved it, but I think what happened for me is that when you take the humor out of the Addams Family situation, it kind of loses some of the charm. So I felt really frustrated with the middle section, because I felt like the tension wasn't ramping up the way it needed to effectively communicate to the reader that something's coming. I just thought it was just very almost monotonous in the middle, whereas the first 25% it felt very rushed to me. And while I liked the characters in concept and aesthetics for all of them, except for Eleanor and 1 or 2 other characters, I felt that a lot of the family was pretty underdeveloped and kind of caricatures or one-dimensional. So her sister Luma is was to me very one-dimensional. She was her older sister, but she was very kind of spoiled and childish, and so in every scene she's spoiled and childish. She doesn't really have that much depth to her, at least not to me. That book was a 3-star, so it was a little bit disappointing to me, but I still would really recommend it for people who are interested, because aesthetically I still think it was phenomenal. I loved the imagery, the spooky haunted house. I was obsessed. Okay, 2 more. I finished these both on the last day of the month. So first was I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. I give this book 4 stars. It is the first in her 7 autobiographies that she's written, and it really covers her childhood up to when she's 16 and gives birth to her son. I thought it was fantastic, truly fantastic. As I was reading it, I was like, it's so weird that she picked some of these smaller kind of mundane moments to put into it. But then I was thinking these are the moments that make a person, and if she was writing about a fictional person, these are the moments that that writers have to compensate for in their writing, doing character development, because we can't see these moments that make someone who they are. You know what I mean? Oh my god. My mom appeared in the door and scared the shit out of me. Okay, phenomenal writing, so compelling. So there was some very difficult topics, definitely trigger warning for sexual assault of a child in this book. So hard to read at some points, but I listened to it while I was going on walks around the neighborhood, and it's just so good. I can obviously see, I can't wait to read more from her. It's the first thing I've read from Maya Angelou, so I can't wait to read more. And then last of the month, unfortunately my least favorite book of the month, and that is Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. This is a pretty popular adult YA adult crossover. I thought it was YA, but then other people were saying it was adult, so it's a little confusing. But it is basically a fantasy horror about a girl named Emmanuelle, who her mother was burnt for witchcraft, and when she comes of age, stuff starts happening in her town of Bethel, and these plagues beset the city. And it's really about the dangers of puritanical extremism and women's power and misogyny. And I liked a lot of the themes that it was working with, and I can definitely 100% see why other people liked it. This is the book that I know other people like this book, and I definitely see why, but it just doesn't work for me. And I think it's because I'm a little less inclined to enjoy horror or fantasy that stems from some sort of extreme Christianity, because I love like possession stories. I think those are really fun because you can kind of like make fun of people, but like I feel like the puritanical control of women's bodies is so close to real life, and as a Jewish woman, I feel like I have been, and my family and my history and my people have been so affected by rigid expectations of Christianity that society like already puts on people, that it was just like almost boring for me for a lot of it. I listened to the first half on audiobook and wasn't feeling it and put it down, and I picked up the second half on my Kindle, and I definitely think that is the better route for me to have read this book. I enjoyed the second half way better than the first half, so maybe I would have liked it better if I had read it physically. I don't know, but it definitely wasn't the one for me, unfortunately. And with that, I've been filming for 36 minutes. I have to go. I had other things I wanted to talk about, is like February TBR, kind of like maybe, or like this other stuff I've been doing, but that is gonna have to wait for another video, I guess. So I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!